What's up, witches? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Syzygy, and today's video is going to be the obligatory art teacher video that literally every single art YouTuber makes. Yes, as the title implies, I took art in middle school and I hated it. I've had a lot of god-awful teachers in my life, from teachers who gave me bad grades because they didn't like me to teachers that I fought with like cats and dogs. I've had a lot of negative experience with my educators. However, the art teacher at my old middle school embodies the exact type of teacher I don't like. I don't think that he was like the worst teacher I ever had in an objective sense, more so our personalities just didn't mesh. The worst teacher I have ever had is probably this science teacher that I had in 7th grade, but that chick was just nuts. One time she slapped a kid. Maybe that's a video topic for the future. Back on topic though, I'll be calling the art teacher Mr. T for teacher. I know, very creative, lavish me in praise. Mr. T was the only art teacher that we ever had in the entire middle school, so all 3 of those hellish years, he was there, making them ever so slightly worse. My middle school year was divided into terms instead of semesters. There were 4 terms in each school year, and each term was probably about 2 months long, give or take maybe a week or 2. Also in my school, art was actually a required class instead of an elective. I mean, they called it an elective, but it was actually a required class, and if you didn't take it, then you would get clapped. Now, let me paint a picture of what I was like in middle school for all y'all. For some frame of reference, I was often called vampire chick or goth girl by a lot of my classmates, simply for wearing a lot of black. I didn't even dress that gothy. I looked more like an anime girl than anything else. I literally just wore skirts and thigh highs. To be honest, I look more gothic now than I did as a kid, especially when you consider how much eyeliner I wear. Not only was I the goth chick, heavy quotations there, but I was also the quiet kid. Being the introverted, neurodivergent kid I was, I usually kept to myself and either read my book or I did that other thing that everyone knew me for. Yes, drawing. Yes, I was that heckin' kid. I was one of those kids who was always drawing in class unapologetically without any regard for who was watching me. And nah, I wasn't just a doodler. Of course I would have to bring my whole collection of Tombow markers and microline pens to school. Of course I would have to make a whole piece in the middle of class. That's great. And why did my teachers let me do this? Because I usually had straight A's. But that's besides the point. The fact of the matter is that my art going into 6th grade made a huge leap in quality. Not to say that it was good because it wasn't. But I made this huge jump from drawing warrior cats, yes, that phase happened, to drawing anime girls. Now I know what you're thinking, this is one of those I drew anime so my art teacher hated me types of videos, but no, this is actually not what happened. Don't worry, I'll get there. So in 6th grade, I was actually pretty excited to go into an art class because I had actually never been to an art class before. Up until that point, I had just been through elementary and intermediate school, and in those cases, art was just an extra thing that we occasionally did in class here and there. So tiny, Undertale-obsessed me thought that I would be able to sketch my OCs and sands for an hour every day. But no, the actual class had a lot more boring and a lot less enrichment, let me tell ya. Turns out that our teacher was actually a modern art-obsessed, pseudo-woke, self-flating English major. No, I'm not kidding. Most of his class was analyzing, like, really boring pieces of modern art. I don't even hate modern art, but this was just painful. As I mentioned before, Mr. T was actually an English major, so he was always looking for the stupidest analysis. It's the whole, the curtains are purple, signifying depression and loss, thing all over again. Most of the days in that class were occupied by these quote-unquote critiques, but we did occasionally draw in that class. Besides the critique days, there were always the follow-along with the teacher type days in which we would just draw something step by step with the teacher. I remember us drawing a realistic eye the first year. Finally, there were 2 projects that we had to do each year. The first project of the year was always a drawing in graphite on a huge piece of paper, and the second project was always something a little bit more artsy, like painting or sculpting. The first year we made pottery with clay, except it wasn't really pottery because we didn't have a pottery wheel. We were just given clay and told to sculpt it into something deep. Public school system, am I right? At the end of each of our projects, we were expected to present them to the class and list 5 examples of symbolism in our work. What that symbolism means, etc., etc. So now we get into the actual story. One fateful day, Mr. T was walking around the classroom while we were writing our critiques. This was first year, so I was probably about 12. I had already finished mine, so I was drawing something in my sketchbook. I don't really remember what it was, but it was probably like fresh sands or something. At that point, I didn't realize that Mr. T was behind me until he gasped. Comically loudly, may I add. He snatched my half-finished work away from me and then sprinted up to the document camera like a chipmunk on speed. He put it under the camera and was like, "Hey, look at this, everyone! We got a talented young lady in our class this year!" Every kid looked up at the projector, saw my art, and then slowly turned to look back at me. A piece of my soul died that day. I was mortified, and rightfully so apparently, because this incident is what earned me the reputation of the drawing girl throughout the entirety of my time in that school district. After that point, things got even worse. Mr. T would constantly call on me during discussions and critiques, even if I never raised my hand. He would also always want me to speak in front of the class. Public speaking is definitely not one of my strong suits, let me tell ya. The thing that leaves me most vexed to this day is one time when I heard some kid walk up to Mr. T and say, "Hey, Mr. T, I don't know what to do, could you help?" And Mr. T really replied with, "Oh, maybe you should ask Madison over there, she can probably help you." I am livid. Besides him always shoving me in the spotlight when I clearly didn't want to be there, 6th grade and 7th grade art were both pretty uneventful. But 8th grade, oh boy, 8th grade was a year alright. Just for some backstory, my 7th grade year was very poor for my mental health. I went through a really bad, toxic relationship at the time, and I was not over it going into 8th grade. Little did I expect the very person that I wanted to be around the very least would be in my art class. For transparency's sake, I just want to say that this person and I have talked things out, both apologized, all that jazz. But at the time we hadn't, and there was a lot of bad blood and ill feelings toward one another. So this person that I was beefing with at the time was in my art class. Great. Not only that, but we're both artists and they were and are very talented. I had this weird idea that I had to be better than them or something. It was petty and stupid, honestly. Back to the story though, for our first project of the year, I remember I did this picture of a disjointed marionette hanging by a puppeteer's strings, surrounded by disembodied eyes. All was good there, I had fun making that one. The second project was the bad one. For the second project, we were supposed to do a painting. So, you may not know this about me, but I despise painting. I like paintings, don't get me wrong, I just don't like painting myself. To tell you the truth, my painting skills are absolute donkey. Problems arose even before we started painting though. My original concept was about balancing a good work ethic with a healthy amount of self-care. I have always struggled with being a workaholic, so I thought it would be kind of an appropriate concept for me. So I started on my rough draft and began drawing on a smaller piece of paper before moving to the painting section. Mr. T asked to look at my work, and so I handed it to him. Before I could even get a single goddamn word out, he frowned at my work for the first time ever and then glared at me over the paper. I don't really remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of, "You can do better than this, your concept isn't strong enough, find a new idea, yada yada yada." Then he literally tossed my paper into the fucking trash right in front of me. Looking back, I'm more angry than upset. As an educator, destroying a student's work, no matter how garbage it is a huge no-no and can discourage the student from even trying. In the moment though, I was crushed, devastated. Even though I hated this doucheweed, there is a part of me that wanted his approval of my work, like any kid would. I remember that I cried and started over again. Finally, I came up with a new concept. This time it was about gambling. Well, not literally about gambling, it was just using gambling as a metaphor. I don't remember exactly what I drew, but I believe it was one of those green casino tables. The focal point of the piece, from what I remember, was a few stacks of different colored poker chips. I was actually really excited about this piece. Even though I liked my original idea better, I enjoyed the product that came from the casino concept. After I finished the rough draft, I moved on to the painting part, and this is where things began to sour for me. Once again, my painting skills are non-existent, so the first draft of my painting turned out looking like absolute booty. My confidence was not helped by the watchful eyes of Mr. T, who was criticizing my painting pretty harshly here and there and saying that I need to do better. I started this thing over like 3 different times with new canvases, and every single time the painting looked like dog shit. The perfectionist in me was quaking, so eventually I became frustrated enough to ask if I could just do my drawing on paper. At first he told me I could, but when I got upset, He finally agreed to let me draw it on paper, as long as the paper was large. I actually had a large blank paper at home, and I said that I wanted to bring it in. But he stopped me and said that I had to use one of his big papers, and that the picture had to be fully colored. So that's what I did. I think I mentioned before that I used Tombow markers when I did traditional art. For those of you who don't have them or don't know how they work, Tombow markers are water-based markers intended to be used with a specific type of paper. If you use the wrong kind of paper with them, then they will dry out and become worn a lot more quickly. You can probably tell where this is going. I finished the casino piece with just half of my sanity left, but what didn't make it through were some of my markers. A lot of them were pretty much fucked and I couldn't use them anymore. All for this stupid art piece. The worst part of it was that I didn't even like the final product. However, even the perfectionist side of me was so broken that I didn't want to reattempt it for the sake of my remaining sanity. We presented our projects in front of the class. I was awkward and horrible, and art class ended. I never had to go back after the term ended. Thank the goddess. And just so you guys know, no, I never picked up a goddamn paintbrush ever again. Fuck that. That art class and art teacher were what I would describe as total booty. I learned nothing that I didn't already know the entire 3 years I was there, and every second in that class was another second of agony. I haven't actually been to a traditional art class since then. At the moment, I'm taking an art history course at the college I go to, but that's it. Never again. With all of that being said, if you've made it to the end of this video and liked it, feel free to leave a like, a comment, or even subscribe to become one of my familiars. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and don't forget to stay magical.